There we go. Light off. So let me have a look at what she has here on her table. Okay. She has, all right, so it looks like it's just the 3 activities: push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. I would do a 2-mile power walk. This body doesn't do running anymore. So at the moment, that's the only suggestion we have. So that'll be where we're going, unless anybody else comes up with an idea. But I agree. I think it would be fun to know where we would fall on the table, especially since the oldest is 36, so I'm off the table already. So if I can keep up with the 36-year-olds, I'll be doing well. I might have to dig in and find some more of the protocols, because this is just the actual table. Yeah, okay, I like that idea. I think that's good. All right, we've got a nice group in, so let's have a look at this chapter. Okay. All right. So, as usual, my plan isn't to kind of go through the whole chapter. I just want to highlight a few things that I feel are specifically relevant to maybe your age group, things that you can do to hopefully mitigate the chances of developing any kind of cancers. And that's not always possible, no matter how healthy you are, okay? So, but what is important is understanding some of these detection ideas, right? So, let's have a quick look at the most prevalent kind of risk factors for cancer in adults in the US. So obviously we have these ones that we can't do anything about, right? So if you have a family history of a particular form of cancer, then that's really key to keep an eye on and get, regular checkups for. Just getting older, unfortunately, puts us at more risk as the tissues start to degrade. Things can go wrong there. And whether you're male or female plays a role in the development of certain cancers. All right, so those are things we really can't do anything about, but doesn't mean that we should ignore, right? Just means that those are ones we have to be looking for all the time, right? Then we've got ones that are lifestyle dictated, all right? So cigarette smoking is a big one, but also chew, all right? And in this population, where I am in eastern New Mexico, there's a lot of people on campus, even though campus is a tobacco-free zone. There's a lot of people that ignore that rule and walk around campus with chew, right? It's a tobacco-free zone, not a smoking-free zone. So having chew stuffed in your cheek is also against the rules to be on campus, right? But not just on campus, just around town when you go to the supermarket or to a restaurant or outside pickup. at the moment, right? It just is, unfortunately, seems to be a habit of choice for people around here. I have noticed, so this is anecdotal, but I have noticed that the students I have to reprimand more often than not are baseball players. So I don't know what that is about. There seems to be some kind of culture in baseball that makes chew acceptable, which is daft, right? But also remember our dietary patterns. We have control over our nutritional choices. So some of those nutritional choices are linked to risk factors for certain cancers. Physical activity is a big one, right? The more physically active I am, typically the less likely I am for certain cancers. Again, not all of them, and it doesn't always prove to be a protection, all right? And then weight management is important, okay? So the science, the research shows us that certain cancers we have identifiable causes for, and then there are others that we just don't know why they happen, all right? So it's just, you know, really understanding what can I do to protect myself or to monitor myself so that I can pick something up early if I need to, all right? So let's have a look at the tobacco idea first of all. So if you go to table 13.2, and I don't have a page number here, which is not very helpful. Let me look at that for you. That's 13.1. Okay, 13.2 is on page 436. That's a list of the cancers that the research would indicate are caused by smoking. So we have, surprisingly, things like bladder and esophagus, kidney, obviously lung, but and mouth and throat. Those ones are kind of more obvious, but also pancreas and stomach. So cancers that you wouldn't necessarily consider being linked with smoking can be. Lung cancer is obviously the highest one. About 87% of individuals who die from lung cancer were tobacco users. So that's a big number. We would hope that that number will go down because overall the prevalence of smoking, in particular using a cigarette, had gone down. Now we don't have the data yet on vaping, right? So is vaping a safe alternative to smoking when it comes to cancer risk? We don't know yet. That's going to take, it hasn't been around long enough for us to have that kind of data yet. I suspect not. Like it'll just replace lung cancer with something else. You know, it's chemicals that aren't supposed to be in your body, so ultimately that's likely to cause something, I think, right? It's, as I said, it's just going to be a while before we find that out. So the symptoms for lung cancer, if you have a chronic cough but you're not sick, if you are wheezing or have chest pain, or you regularly catch lung infections, colds, bronchitis, chest, respiratory infections, right? The risk is a cumulative scenario, right? It's not one cigarette at a party once a month, right? It's how many do I have every day? How many years have I been smoking? How much do I inhale? And what's the tar level of the cigarette that I choose, right? So, for example, I mean, I can only relate to my experiences. I've never touched a cigarette in my life. My sister had the same peer group, we went to the same parties, we went to the same youth group, and she started smoking when she was 14. And her decision, she says, was due to really peer pressure. So that's always interesting to me, because I can remember people saying, you know, here, have a fag. And I would just go, ew, why would I put something that smells so awful in my mouth, right? That doesn't make sense to me. And she's now, what am I, I'm 57, so she's coming up for 56, and she's still a smoker. Now, she will deny she's still a smoker because she has switched to vaping. As I said, we'll wait and see what the research says about that. I can't argue that case with her right now because I don't have the science to back up my opinion. So I just let it go, right? If you can quit, and here's the key, right? If you've started, right, you're kind of in the hole. It is a hugely addictive drug. And if you've started, the judgment's over, right? It's very, very difficult. It is one of the most difficult drugs to give up once you're addicted to it, right? So if you've started, now the goal is, how do I get away from this, right? For me personally, you know, my approach, I have the same thing with my alcohol, with my wine, right? My approach is, it's ruling me, and I don't like that, right? That's a battle I have almost every day with myself when I start to pour the wine at 5:30, right? That tobacco, that's the same thing, right? It's controlling me. It's costing me a lot of money, and it's making me typically unwell. Again, there are people who smoke. My mother smoked her whole life from the age of 12. She died at 78, and her lungs were clear as a bell, apparently, according to the doctor, right? So that's insane to me, okay? But that's not a typical picture, I don't think, right? If you can quit, then if you can keep it up, by 10 years out, you have half the risk that you had if you were going to be a smoker, right? It's not like quitting completely reduces all your risk, because damage has already been done, right, at the cellular level. But by quitting, you significantly improve your risk of developing lung cancer. And your cardiovascular risk goes down within a year, right? And your cardiovascular risk can go back to normal if you can remain a non-smoker, right? So there's a lot of good things involved in taking that step, right? And that's why I think, you know, looking at these changing health habits worksheets that you guys are doing, that I think is an important tool, because the first step is saying, I don't want to do this anymore, right? The first step is not, I'm going to quit today. All right? The first step is making the decision that you don't want to do that behavior anymore. That's the hard bit, I think, at least for me personally, right? Passive smoking, so if you grew up in a house where people smoked, that increases your risk for lung cancer. If you are a smoker and you have a baby in the back seat but you smoke in the car, then that puts that infant at much higher risk for damage and ongoing issues with chest infections and things. So we need to think outside the box a little bit. So, oral cancers in the mouth, on the tongue, in the larynx or the esophagus are quite easy to pick up because the symptoms are quite obvious, like your voice gets very kind of rough and blurred, and you might have difficulty swallowing depending on where the tumor is. You might have a continual sore throat, right? And often your dentist is the one, right? If you go for regular dental checkups, your dentist might be the person who identifies a mass or a discoloration of a certain area that warrants investigation, right? And the problem with oral cancers is that they tend to spread very, very quickly. So if you don't pick them up early, then that can lead to ongoing problems. Okay, and I've got a link here. Remember that chapter 8, we talked about tobacco and alcohol in chapter 8 as well, so you can go back and revisit some of the information in that chapter. Let me find this. Okay, so just to give you another resource, right? There's lots of information at the Oral Cancer Foundation. They have fundraisers. They have lots of information about how to, well, that's interesting, a rodeo tobacco outreach. Interesting, right? How to check your mouth, right? Lots of information about screening, how to understand things, okay? It's, sticking your head in the bucket isn't the way to deal with something that could be malignant, right? I have an uncle who lost part of his tongue and cheek, and I also had a colleague, Dr. Berkey was here, and she was never a smoker, but she actually developed one. So, the idea is you've got to catch it early. Catch it as soon as you can. Don't go, I got a little white spot on my tongue. That's boring, right? Keep an eye on it. If it starts to get bigger, go get it checked straight away. Don't feel like, oh, this is going to be a waste of my time or a waste of the doctor's time, right? If the doctor says, oh, it's not a malignant tumor, that's a good thing, right? Okay? Look here, right? So others, as I said, some that you probably, certainly I wouldn't have thought of before I read this chapter. It wouldn't have occurred to me that the kidney and the bladder and the pancreas could be impacted by tobacco use. Obviously alcohol use, that makes complete and utter sense. but that the chemicals and things that are absorbed into the body from smoking could impact the kidney and the bladder. I had no idea at all. There's also some information, it's the carcinogens that you're taking in, right, that can enter the bloodstream. So if you have some blood in your urine, for example, that may not just be a kidney infection. That could be an indication of something else. Men, I believe, are more at risk for these cancers if they smoke than women. But I may be wrong on that, but I believe that's one of those sex differentials. Pancreatic cancer is difficult to pick up, right? The symptoms are a bit vague and haphazard. Might develop jaundice, so that one's a little easier to see, like your eyeballs, your eyes go a bit yellow, and your skin might go a bit yellow. Weight loss, so significant weight loss. The problem is that jaundice and weight loss typically come quite late into the cancer developing. So if you don't pick it up before that, you've got a long road ahead of you to deal with it, right? The risk, particularly for pancreatic cancer, increases a lot after the age of 50. Obesity is strongly linked with pancreatic cancer. Having a diet that's very high in fat, being sedentary or only very low active, developing diabetes, right? And I hate statistics, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a while, but I hate the statistics that are always chucked out around cancer, right? Oh, you know, because that makes the C word so scary, and then we don't go get a checkup because we don't want to hear the C word, right? So the survival rate for pancreatic cancer, if you don't catch it really early, is very poor, right? And that's as much as I'm going to say, because again, it's paying attention to your body. What is your body telling you, right? So then, again, maybe cancers we might not immediately connect to our diet, but things like cancer in the colon and the rectum are pretty high. If stomach cancer is also can be related to diet. Colorectal cancers, anything in the bowels, there has a strong hereditary component. So that's one of those, you know, if there's any history of that in the family, it's really important to get regular checkups. If your diet is very low in fiber, right? A diet that has fiber in it. So, you know, whole wheat bread, fresh fruits and vegetables, or frozen, as we talked about, you know, frozen fruit. Fruits and vegetables, period, right? I mean, there are people that literally never eat fruits and vegetables. Okay? But that fiber helps the walls of the colon and the rectum, right? We want to exercise again, right? So less meat, more fish. So no red meat, okay? No one who's a nutritionist or a health and wellness person in their right mind, in my view, would say no red meat, particularly to an American, because that's kind of blasphemous almost. But can I change my diet so that maybe I don't eat red meat 5 times a week? Right? If you have a family history, here again, of inflammatory bowel disease, right, or IBS, if there's a history of polyps in the colon or the rectum, right? So more than 1 alcoholic drink a day, so I guess that puts me at risk. Smoking, right? All these things are things I can control to help, and the big one is get checks, particularly if you have a family history. Get the checks done, right? All right, and then a really big one, I think, particularly for, I mean, most of you are going to come, hopefully, back to school at some point next year, right? Portalis is at 4,000 feet, so that significantly increases the strength of the UV spectrum that we're exposed to. And so I think that this one is huge for us, because it's easy to be a little bit lazy about taking care of your skin, especially when you're young. I remember doing some awful things when I was an undergrad to my skin that I really regret doing now. You know, any kind of UV ray is dangerous and can lead to a skin cancer. And any kind of tan, which we all love, right? You feel better, you feel like you look better. Any kind of a tan is damage to your skin, right? So the more that we're exposing our skin to UV rays, the more chance we've got of, you know, you'll get really wrinkly, really young, or you'll develop a form of skin cancer, all right? Tanning parlors that say they only use UVB rays and therefore you're not at risk for skin cancer, that isn't true, right? The science, the research says UVB can also cause a problem, right? So UVC radiation that can be emitted from certain sources is also cancer-causing radiation. So like when you go for a mammogram or any kind of X-ray stuff, there's a reason, or even to the dentist, right, when they're doing those X-rays, there's a reason the person taking the X-ray isn't in the room, okay? The types of skin cancers are important to pay attention to, because the risk of it being something that's going to be problematical to deal with changes depending which type develops. All right. So a basal cell is the most common type. It's typically a very slow growing kind of cancer, and it doesn't spread, it doesn't metastasize very often. And so that's one that often will develop on a part of the skin that has regular exposure to the sun. So your face, the backs of your hands, or your arms if you always wear cut-off t-shirts, right? Or your legs if you always wear shorts, kind of thing. It's about 60% of skin carcinomas are basal cell. It's relatively easy to deal with. They can cut it out. You don't even have to necessarily go under for that, depending on where it is. I mean, it's a but you have to be willing to go and get something that looks like it's changing, right? Particularly if it's a mole, and then the shape changes, or the surface changes, right? Go get it checked out, okay? Squamous cell, that's a lovely word to say, squamous. Squamous cells are flat, they tend to be red rather than browny, and scaly, and sometimes they're a little bit kind of lifted up off of your skin. Okay? It's the second most common type, particularly in individuals who have lighter skin. So if you're fair-haired, blue-eyed, and fair-skinned, that one's a real possibility, right? About 30% of skin cancers are squamous. So we've got 60% are basal, 30% are squamous. We're left with 10% that are malignant melanoma. Malignant melanoma is the most problematical, right? It's very common in men who are white, it's particularly if they work outdoors. They seem to have a much higher risk than women. So we're looking at 10% or less of cancers, but malignant melanoma results in the most number of deaths, right? And I had a person that used to train in the gym when I was younger, when I was in my, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s. And she had blonde red blonde hair. She was very, very freckled. She grew up in South Africa, and her parents never put sunscreen on. She used to get burned all the time. So sunburns in children are really dangerous because they lead to damage that can lead to malignant melanoma later on. And this young lady, because she was so freckled, never found her melanoma, and the first indication that she was sick was when she had a seizure, and it had spread to her brain. And I think she lived about 7 months at that point. It was so far gone, it was spread everywhere, that there was nothing to be done. So, you know, trying to protect children, make sure that they learn a sunscreen habit is really important. Wear a hat, wear sunglasses, wear sunscreen, wear long sleeves and long pants if you're going to be in the garden a lot. Right? I know it's nice to be out in shorts and a little skimpy t-shirt, but we're at 4,000 feet, people, and if you live in Albuquerque or Santa Fe, it's even higher, right? So, you know, it's something to pay very careful attention to, right? The other thing that I think is really important to point out is that, you know, it's kind of obvious for us whiteys that we should wear sunscreen. But if you are of color, if you are black, if you are Hispanic, that does not mean you don't need sunscreen. That means it's going to be harder to detect one of these if they develop, right? So that's something I think that's very important. I have this argument with black students who come out to the playground with me all the time. I'm like, do you have your sunscreen on? They're like, I don't need to wear sunscreen. Did you see the color of my skin? Yeah, you do. Right? Yes, you do. Okay? So, preventions, right? Limit sun exposure. Doesn't mean don't have any sun exposure. Some, you know, vitamin D in humans is produced in response to sunlight. So, and that's an important vitamin, right? But you don't want to sit out there for 3 hours. Okay? Use your sunscreen, and I'll show you some advice from the FDA in just a minute. Wear protective clothing. So I love that you can now buy clothing that is specifically UP50, for example. So when we go hiking, we've always got long sleeve shirts, long sleeve pants, big brim hats, right? Sometimes, depending on where we're hiking, we might even wear fingerless gloves to protect the backs of our hands, or buy shirts that have thumb holes in them so you can pull them down over the back of your hands. Right? If you are going to be out for a period of time, you want to protect yourself. Okay? Avoid artificial UV lights, so tanning beds. Okay? Note where you are, right? How close to the equator are you? What's your elevation, right? Both those things increase your risk for skin cancer. Okay. The FDA now require that tanning beds carry visible warning signs, and anyone less than 18 who's not paying for it and making their own decisions often should not be using tanning beds, right? They probably would suggest that adults don't use them, but you know, use good sunscreen, wear long sleeves, wear long pants, wear a hat, wear sunglasses. Gotta do it if you're gonna live here, right? Okay, so let's have a quick, just in case you have family histories, there's quite a lot of other information in this chapter, okay? Here's a biggie, right? It's really important. If you don't already do this, now is the time to start, all right? At least once a month, if not just every time you're in the shower or the bath, do a self-exam for breasts and testicles, all right? They have very clear guidelines for you in the chapter to teach you how to do these tests, all right? And to do a self-exam takes, you know, no time, a minute, and it could save your life. And I say this from experience, okay? Because I found a lump when I was 26, and I ignored it initially, right? Because at that point in my life, I didn't drink. I exercised every day. I was doing a lot of bodybuilding, so I was it was serious exercise every day, right? Very hardcore, intense work. And I felt a lump, and I'm like, huh, that's weird. But I know I'm not sick because I would feel it in the gym, right? You can't train that hard and not know when you're sick. So I knew I wasn't sick, so I ignored it for a while. I thought, oh, it's going to go away. Well, it didn't go away. It didn't get any bigger. So I kept ignoring it. And then one day I made mention that I had found this funny lump and it wasn't going away to a friend of mine. She went berserk. She rang me every day. Have you been to the doctor? Have you had it checked? Have you been to the doctor? Eventually I gave in and went to the doctor. The doctor went, oh, it won't be anything. You're young, you're fit, you're healthy, you don't drink, there's no family history. Oh, it's nothing. We'll just do an ultrasound. I bet it's just a fluid lump. Did an ultrasound. Was it a fluid lump? Hell no. It was solid. So he's like, huh, that's weird. Okay, well, we'll send you for a biopsy just to check. It won't be anything. So I go to a different doctor, And that doctor goes, oh, it won't be anything. You're young, you're fit, you don't drink, there's no family history. It'll be fine, let's do the biopsy. I'm lying on the table. It's my birthday. It's my 27th birthday. I'm lying on the table. The doctor and the nurses are singing happy birthday to me. And the doctor goes, huh, when did you say you found this lump? And I'm like, oh, crap. Right? And I have breast cancer. 27, no family history, exercise every day, eat well, don't drink, don't smoke. Okay? Luckily, my friend made me go to the doctor because we found my cancer very, very early. I had no spread to my lymph nodes, which meant it wasn't anywhere else in my body. And I'm 30 years out. Right? But if I hadn't been doing this, that picture could have been very, very, very different. Okay? So I don't say that to be scary. I say that to make you aware that you are responsible for taking care of your body. And part of that means do what is needed to learn what your body feels and looks like. Okay? Because you're the one that knows when something isn't right. Okay? All right, so let me just show you some of this information on the sunscreen stuff. Hopefully I haven't freaked you all out. Okay, let's do this one first. Okay, so this link is on one of the note pages in the PowerPoint. So here's some information from the FDA, and they've actually released some new guidelines, which I'll show you in a minute. All right, so there's some things here to think about, like how do you store your sunscreen? Who knew how you stored your sunscreen had anything to do with how well it worked? Not me until I read this, right? Maybe I'm just daft, I don't know, right? What are the ingredients? What are the SPFs, right? What does that mean? Okay, so there's lots of information here. And what I like about this link is that they've kind of made it fun to look at, right? And to read, and to then share with your family or your kids, right? So I think that one is worth some time, all right? And then if I change here, does that change on the page for you? No. Okay, so let's close that, and then I'll show you this one. This is a cool website. EWG is a cool website, but they have this sunscreen guide, so you can start to look at, you know, which sunscreens score more highly, right? They're better than another one. And it isn't always, what's interesting when you look at the guide, it's not always the cheap store brand that is at the bottom of the list, right? So, you know, I think it's worth considering, right? What are my needs? How much can I afford? How often am I in the sun? you know, things like that, and put your little picture together and then find something that meets your needs, right? Don't stick your head in a bucket and pretend you don't need sunscreen. Right? And then here's some tips about being in the sun. Okay, teach your little ones to use their sunscreen. Use some sunglasses to protect your eyes. All kinds of stuff like that. Cool info in a very manageable, easy way to look at it. I think that's another really easy website to use to get information. Okay, and then the last little bit is just to show you. Do I have that up? Where is it? I have it here. Why can't I find it on the share application? There it is. Okay. Coming up, good. Okay. So this was, this is coming up a year and a half ago now. The FDA made some major changes to their guidelines, and what they are suggesting is that the ingredients in sunscreens may not any longer be safe, and so they're only going to recommend sunscreens that have zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. If you have sunscreens that have PABA or trolamine salicylate, they're not considered safe, period, so throw them out. And the other ingredients that tend to be used, oxybenzonate, things like that are in sunscreens, they're recommending you don't use, but there isn't enough research yet to really say they're not safe. Okay? So what they're recommending is that we all wear lovely white sunscreens. So now I'm on a hunt for the best mineral sunscreen that doesn't leave me pasty white. So yeah, that's the FDA's recommendation as of last year. So there we go. And that, my friends, is all I have for you today. Oh, which is perfect timing because it's the end of class. Excellent. Questions, comments? I kind of didn't stop talking long enough to give you a chance to jump in and ask any questions. So does anybody have anything? Okay, well, I hope there was useful info there. As I said, I really have fingers and toes crossed that you'll be back at least next August. It's not looking too promising for January. Maybe after spring break, that would be nice. I don't know. But yeah, just some things for you to think about living in an environment like this. Okay? All right, well, I'll shut up now and let you get on with your day. Have a lovely day. If you are around here, it's going to be ridiculously warm. 84 degrees, which is insane for November. Snow last week and 84 degrees this week. So everything's a little lopsided right now. But enjoy the day. It is going to be lovely. So we might as well enjoy it, even if it doesn't mean that the world is healthy. Okay? All right. Bye for now.
Bye.